We used to have baseball. Yeah.
All right, welcome to the Upstate Orange Podcast on FingerLakes1.com. I'm Jim Sinicropi, and it's been a while since we've had an episode of one of these, and we did say we were not going to officially retire the podcast because you never know what could happen, and tonight the podcast is happening, and we're going to draft the top 40 all-time Syracuse basketball legends here, fantasy draft style, with an incredible panel that first and foremost will include my longtime co-host of the Upstate Orange Podcast, Brad Connor. Brad, welcome back to the show.
Jim, it is a thrill to be with you after all these years. It's been way too long since we've sat in these chairs and talked Syracuse basketball, and I am pumped to get this started tonight.
Yeah, and we've had plenty of conversations through the years on the podcast that could pertain to how we might draft tonight. So I think I might be able to steal a player from you if I have to, and maybe vice versa.
I would guess that you and I could probably pick each other's picks before they're picked.
Now, a little context, we both graduated from Minders Academy in Seneca Falls in 1990. My first memory of a Syracuse basketball game was Manley Fieldhouse with Bill Rafferty as a coach at Seton Hall when my dad and uncle took me up to a game at Manley. You go back just about as far as I do, being that we're the same age, but the rest of our panel tonight comes from Naples High School, a trio from Naples, maybe perhaps a little younger than you and I, Brad, but we've got from FingerLakes1.com, you may have heard him calling high school basketball games on FL1 Sports, Brendan Harrington. Brendan, hello.
Hello, it is great to be here. I am so excited.
And, of course, this was your idea, and you were actually going to run the draft tonight, so you're going to be the officiant of the draft.
Yes. Shout out to WGR out of Buffalo. They've been doing these Friday drafts, and I guess we could kind of blame it on Dave Ekis, who we're going to introduce here in a minute, because he told me about the Seinfeld draft the other day. That got me listening to the Buffalo Bills all-time draft, and then the light bulb went off, and here we are.
Well, we also have Tane Robinson. Tane, sat by you in the broadcast booth several times in our day, and you got the coolest backdrop of anybody tonight.
Yeah, I went with a Syracuse backdrop tonight. Like many people, I've become a little bit of a Zoom expert all of a sudden with the change in the way that the work environment works now. But been a Syracuse fan for a long time, and I don't know when I first started watching, but probably early 80s. And then my mother attended Syracuse Law School and was taking me to games. And I remember getting to some Big East classics between Syracuse and Georgetown. And she hooked me up with a bunch of autographs, like Michael Edwards, Brendan's favorite point guard, and Mike Hopkins. So a lot of good Syracuse memories in my family.
Yeah, Mike Edwards once cheated off me on a test when I was at school at Syracuse. Our careers overlapped, and I was a little nervous because if he was looking to maintain eligibility, I was the wrong guy, to be cheating off of. And so there's Dave Ekis. Ekis or Ekis?
Ekis.
Yeah.
Ekis, definitely the best hat tonight with the orange and blue feathers and plumes and all. Welcome to the draft, and I know that we've drafted before in Brendan's annual NCAA March Madness player draft, so we're not total strangers.
Not total strangers, and I'm really excited to be here, but I don't have any broadcast experience like the rest of you guys, so I'm probably a little bit more nervous and prone to make some mistakes along the way a little bit more than you guys, but I'm happy to be here.
Well, that's okay because this is going to be competitive between the five of us. When it's done, I think that we should be able to all agree on maybe who has the best team. And I think that the way that I'm going about it, and I don't know if you guys agree with me, is that I'm drafting a team that I can put on the court in Fantasyland to play against your teams, So I want to make sure I got the good ball handlers and the big front court, and so that's how I'm going after it. I'm not going for players I necessarily my favorite players. I'm trying to build the ultimate team here.
Yep, as if it was a 4-team tournament and these teams were going head-to-head, and how would they fare against one another when it comes to who has the best team? Definitely. So it's going to be hard, though. I'm going to be, each of our teams, I don't know who the coach will be, if we'll be the coach, but I think I'm going to kind of have the Boeheim system in mind when I'm thinking about putting my team together, which was part of the reason we went with 8-man rosters, because if you're a Syracuse fan, Boeheim, 8 is his max in his rotation, right? And there's a lot of years where it's 6 or 7 guys. So he's not going more than 8 deep in most every year. So that's
if you're 9, you're transferring.
Exactly. Exactly. So.
Well, I'll turn it right over to you, Brendan. It's your show now, heading out here. The draft, you did a lottery for the draft order. And
we did do a lottery, and Dave Ekis will be the number 1 pick. We're going to do a snake draft. There's just going to be a little bit of a difference in that because there's only 5 people drafting. This is a strategy that's used a lot of times. Is we'll do a snake. So Dave Ekis will have the number 1 pick, then me, then Tane, then Brad. Jim, you'll get back-to-back, and we'll come back down and finish the second round with Dave. But at that point, we will repeat the same order for the third round. So, Jim, you will get the first pick of the second round and the third round.
I like that.
And then we'll go Brad, Tane, me, and Dave, and then we'll do the snake the rest of the way. So that, since Dave gets the number 1 pick, then, that kind of takes away from that a little bit by the fact that he won't get to pick again until 10 and then 15. So there you go. We're done with the nerd talk now. All right. So 8 players, there's no position requirements, but obviously when we analyze these teams, we're going to look at how you constructed them, whether it's size, whether it's athleticism, shooting ability, lack of a point guard, lack of a center. So we're going to be thinking about all those things as we go through. It's based on Syracuse careers. Of course, there'll be some players that are probably picked today that are transfers. It's not based, obviously, on what they did on the other schools, and not based on what players might go on to do in the NBA. So we're talking about how were they in their prime as a Syracuse University Orange men, or if it was after 2002 Orange. All right?
Excellent.
We ready to rock?
Ready.
Good.
Dave Ekis, you are on the clock with the number 1 pick in the all-time Syracuse men's basketball draft. Oh, one more thing before we start. We are saying that this is the Boeheim era. It just gets so difficult if we go before, and we're going to say when Boeheim was a player. So we're talking 1966. So that means Boeheim and Bing are in play as players, and then from that point forward. So
Vic Hanson's off the board.
Exactly. No Vic Hanson. Was it Sadat Singh?
I got a cross.
That means we lose 1 national championship in the process.
Yes. All right, Ekis. Now, this time for real, the number 1 pick. Get us started, buddy.
All right. You made me wait longer, and I feel like I've been waiting for 3 days to make this pick. I'm going with Pearl Washington.
Wow.
And I know, well, there's a lot of reasons. I feel like without him, we wouldn't be having this draft. I feel like he put Syracuse on the map. He was famous before he got to Syracuse. He was a 3-time All Big East first-team selection at a time when the Big East was incredibly difficult. He didn't score a lot of points or as many as some other guys on the list, but I just feel like he is responsible for the longevity of Syracuse basketball, and I couldn't have picked a better person to start the team.
Hey, his number's on the court, right? I mean, you got that going for you, too.
It's a good place to start.
On the 8th day.
Give you this shirt.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Very nice. I could have traded that for you, yeah.
Jim, I know he's your guy. Are you okay?
Right there, baby. Yeah, no, I actually thought he wouldn't have been my first-round pick, even if he may have if he was available, but there's a good chance he wouldn't have, and I loved the guy. That was my nickname in middle school. I had a T-shirt that said on the 8th day, God created the pearl. And
I've known Jim a long, long time. Aside from his wife and his daughter, and maybe his parents, he has never loved a single individual more than he's loved Pearl Washington, I think.
Yeah, but I may not have drafted him in the
other
first
thing
round.
I would say Ekis, an argument for Pearl as number one is entertainment value. I think Boeheim has said before that he was the most just thrilling player to watch in terms of what he was going to do. And it wasn't necessarily because he was the most athletic. It was just his phenomenal passing, his tendency to shine in the big moment, his court vision. You have the stories of him on the playground. There's lots of arguments for him to be the number one pick.
And there's lots of arguments against it, but just to reiterate, I just feel like Syracuse basketball wouldn't be what it is now without him coming in the first place. So
I agree 100%. As a matter of fact, remember how all these the California influx of recruits that followed Pearl, it was because the Big East was rising. ESPN, the Big East was their darling, and those matchups between Villanova and Syracuse and Georgetown and Syracuse and St. John's in Syracuse, they were all featuring like the Pearl as the starring role at these national broadcasts. Yep. And it really was a really special time, and I can't disparage you for taking the Pearl number one. I just don't think I would have in this first round, which shocked me when I got down to making my list. So
well, the great thing about these drafts is that sometimes things don't go as you expect, and then it's always interesting to see how things play out from there. All right, we're going to go to the number 2 pick, and that's me. And I've had it narrowed down to 2 guys, and I won't say yet who the other guy is because I don't want to influence anybody's picks. But I ultimately went with this guy who actually arrived the year after Pearl left, and Pearl left a year early to go into the NBA. And I mean, this guy, when I think of Syracuse basketball in the 1980s, this is the guy that I think of. And for me, the first year I really remember following them closely and advancing them round by round was the 1987 NCAA tournament. He was a freshman and part of just an unbelievable run that came up 1 point short. And I know he missed a key free throw that could have been the difference, but he's second in scoring at Syracuse. He's the all-time leading rebounder. He averaged a double-double. There's only 2 players in college basketball that have more career rebounds than him since 1985, and one of them's named Tim Duncan. He's pretty good. And he is the only Syracuse player picked number 1 in the NBA draft. I know that's not part of the reason we're picking him, but I'm taking DC, Derrick Coleman.
Yeah, I don't blame you there. He's a beast, an absolute beast.
It's unfortunate that he didn't have as good an NBA career as he should have, because it kind of sours national reputation on him and how great he was in college.
Yeah.
He's still a pretty lengthy career. I mean, what do you have, 15 years in the NBA, something like that? I mean, so you got a paycheck for playing in the biggest league in the world for a long time.
Yeah, and he averaged, 20-something points for several years. He was just didn't have the work ethic. That was a knock on him. Super talented, probably the most talented combination of talent and physicality ever to play at Syracuse. And the long left arm of the law is what Bill Raftery used to call him.
Front line looking back with Derrick Coleman and Rony Seikaly in 87 and 88. Just, oh my God, it's an amazing team. And looking back, it's a shame they come up 1 point shy at 87, and then 88 was Sweet 16 team. 89 they lose in the Elite Eight to Illinois. But I guess they lost in the second round in 88. That was the upset to not Navy, Rhode Island. They lost that year. But anyway, yeah, Derrick Coleman, tremendous player. I'll tell you later who the other guy was thinking. But with that, Tommy Robinson. Pearl's gone. DC is gone. You are on the clock.
My guess is you won't have to wait too long to talk about him, Brendan, because I'm going to be selecting, while he only treated us to 1 season at Syracuse, the only player that actually helped deliver a national championship, and that's Carmelo Anthony, who brought home the title for us in 2003 and put together the best freshman season ever at Syracuse. And so I think in this spot, after Coleman's off the board, there's no direction for me to go other than Carmelo.
Yep, that's the other guy I was thinking about. You're right, Tommy. Just a tremendous player, tremendous talent. I think of that smile he had on his face a lot. Obviously, the national championship game and the semifinal. There's a bunch of players that keyed that national championship run, but we all know it went through Carmelo Anthony. And, of course, since he's left, thinking about what he's done for the program with the Carmelo Anthony Center and just kind of the profile of Syracuse and all the recruits that they've been able to land since him, I think that's an important aspect as well. But, yeah, 1 year, right? I mean, can you do any more in 1 year?
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that.
No, hard to go wrong there.
All right, so Carmelo Anthony. So we go point guard and then a couple forwards in Derrick Coleman and Carmelo Anthony. Those certainly different types of forwards. Anthony inside out. And so, Brad, we go to you for the number 4 pick as we roll through our first round.
So I wasn't as prepared for this one as I probably should have been, given the first 3. But I'm going to reshuffle what I had in front of me, given what I have seen. And with Pearl off the board, I need an elite point guard on this team. And I need the greatest distributor of the basketball that college basketball has ever seen. The general, Sherman Douglass. When he left college, he was the all-time NCAA leader in assists. He is a guy that when he had the ball in his hand and you were running the floor, you were going to get an alley-oop dunk. There was no question about it. If you were Stevie Thompson, if you were Derrick Coleman, if you were Derek Brower, you were getting an alley-oop dunk from Sherman Douglass on the fast break. Great floor leader, great defender. He was a first-team All-American. Syracuse has not had, guys, a lot of first-team All-Americans, and he was. He was, again, 1 point away from being a national champion as a sophomore.
Yeah.
As a first-year point guard. This guy has been, in my opinion, undervalued as an elite Syracuse player in history, probably because he had a bit of a journeyman NBA career.
Yeah. But how many years did he play? That just shows how great he was. This undersized guard.
It's the same thing with DC. And those guys, they you only kind of get that acclaim down the road if you've had that elite NBA career. These guys have been very effective professionals, but man, they were great in college, and that's what we're drafting tonight. So Sherman Douglass is my point guard.
Yeah, Sherm certainly softened the blow of losing the Pearl, who after his junior year, I thought the world was ending, and then here comes Sherm Douglass and off to the Final Four, and it didn't take long. I actually remember the second year after losing to Indiana when he made that football hike pass to Stevie Thompson for the dunk at the Garden. I love Sherm.
Yeah, that pass was ridiculous. There are 6 Syracuse players that scored 2,000 points, and Sherman is the second to go off the board. So that famous alley-oop combination of the general to DC, both scored 2,000 points. So 2 of the 6 are gone now. He's the all-time leader in assists. Like you said, he was number 1 in college basketball at the time. Bobby Hurley is the current leader now. But 960 assists. That's an average of 7 per game, which is pretty impressive. He had 22 assists in one game against Providence one time, and 8.5 assists per game as a senior. Just ridiculous numbers, and a ridiculously good player. Awesome. Great pick, Brad. All right, so we've had Pearl, Derrick Coleman, Carmelo Anthony, Sherman Douglass. So 3 players from the 80s. Of course, Carmelo Anthony from the 2003 National Championship team. And now Jim, back-to-back picks to finish the first round and start the second round.
Well, I love the back-to-back picks, and I love the fact that you guys left me John Wallace, maybe the best 44 to ever play at Syracuse. So I'm going to type him in right there. John, I'm going to put his full name in there too, John Wallace.
John Wallace Sr.
And certainly like one of the best college careers of any Section 5 boys basketball player ever.
Yeah, growing up in the Rochester area, we got to see a lot of highlights of him in high school, and I would watch the local evening news and watch John Wallace highlights in up in Rochester playing on the same courts that we were, essentially. It was pretty amazing.
One of the great things about Syracuse players, and the reason I took Wallace, other than the fact that he was just, a 3-category stud and, is up at the top of all the all-time Syracuse lists. But the era that he came, he revitalized the program, and he was a winner. I love guys as a Syracuse fan, especially as a kid, that when they had the ball, you just knew they were going to win the game for you. Like Gerry Mcnamara was like that. Carmelo was like that. Sherman Douglass, Pearl, all the guys that we're mentioning. But John Wallace, he came through. A lot of those guys I just mentioned broke my heart. But John Wallace came through, and he would have came through against one of the best college basketball teams ever assembled in Kentucky in 1996 if the refs could call a fair game.
It's unbelievable that he was there and that the team was there. That run from the 1996 team, I mean, they had no business being in the championship game. They were a good team, don't get me wrong. But, they knock off a great Kansas team in the Elite Eight, and then they get Mississippi State in the semifinals. And that Kentucky team was so good in the championship. But when I think of his tournament run, though, it's that game that Tani and I actually watched together. It was a great story because when Jason Cipolla took the pass from John Wallace against Georgia in the Sweet 16 and hit the shot to send the game into overtime, I jumped up off of Tani's couch in his den up on Italy Valley Road and hit my head on the ceiling fan. And then, of course, Wallace would hit the game winner with that runner. Man, I forgot how good a three-point shooter he was his senior year. 42% from beyond the arc, including that game winner.
He could do it all.
Tony, sorry about the ceiling fan, but what a win that was.
Brendan, I think that's one of those games, if you're a Syracuse fan of a certain age, you remember exactly where you were when you watched that game. There's a handful of games in Syracuse history where you will remember exactly where you were and exactly who you were with when you saw Wallace. Cipolla hit the shot from the Wallace pass, and Wallace hit that shot. I remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah, I think that's deserving Wallace to make it into the first round. I like it, Jim.
And a player whose skill set would be really well suited to the modern NBA game with the range that he had. He would be a real desirable player, the way that the NBA is played right now.
Maybe slightly before his time, maybe. But
and Jim, a little bit of fact is he's probably the only guy that will be drafted tonight that has been on this Upstate Orange podcast.
That's what I was just going to say. Side note, I had an hour-long interview with him on this podcast. Probably around 2015 is one of the favorite conversations I ever had. He was phenomenal to talk to, very candid and open and friendly, and it was a thrill for me. Even though we're of the same age, he's actually younger than me. I think we were at Syracuse at the same time. I think he was a freshman my senior year, it would have been. But I remember seeing him on campus, and he's the anchor of my team. And now I'm going to add in someone else to the team with the second pick, and this is a guy I'm thrilled that fell to me. And I'm sure that you probably think I should take, like, Lawrence Moten. He's, one of the all-time leading scorers, or Gerry Mcnamara is on the board. But I got to go with one of the greatest studs ever to play at Syracuse. Really had unfortunate circumstances in NCAA tournaments, but I think this guy's as good as anybody that's ever played at Syracuse, and that's my man, Billy Owens. And let's put him on the board right now as well.
Wow, Wallace and Owens. That's tough, man. That is tough back to back.
And I wasn't sure, looking back at this first round, I wasn't sure who was going to go in the first round. I wasn't even sure if Carmelo was going to go just because of the 1 year. You assumed he would. I wasn't sure if Sherm would go. I didn't know if Wallace would go. The only two I thought for sure out of that were locks were Pearl and DC. But Billy Owens warrants a first-round pick, I think, too. But I got him on the downside of the second round, and my team is rolling. So we can share Billy Owens' stories later, but I'd say we move along the second round here.
Jim, it's funny that you picked Wallace before Owens, and I would have done the exact same thing. And you pointed out exactly why I would have, because Wallace is a guy who put a team on his back in that 96 season. And as much as I love Billy Owens, for 3 years, he was a dominant Syracuse and Big East player. That was probably the one chink in his armor, is a struggle to put the team on his back. And Jim, I'm going to go and remind you about Billy Owens' last college game.
Yeah.
When he failed to beat the mighty Richmond Spiders.
My freshman year at Syracuse, Brad's freshman year at Richmond, if you can believe that. And they play in the NCAA tournament, and Syracuse is upset, and you heard screams across the campus that night.
Yeah.
My phone didn't take long for my phone to ring either.
The one day that I didn't wear the Syracuse shirt for the Syracuse game.
Yeah, another weird connection. That was an upset. But when Syracuse played UNC Asheville in the first round in 2012, that was the first year after I had done UNC Asheville play-by-play for 6 years. So I knew all those guys on Asheville, and I was torn in that game. And, of course, Asheville took it right down to the wire. Syracuse wanted to win by 7, but there was a call late that should have been
Brandon
out of bounds.
travel or something and got away with it, something like that.
Out of bounds, yeah. So Syracuse was lucky to be able to, and that was right after Fad Mello, of course, got suspended again.
One last note on Billy Owens, because I know we were talking about how Brad was mentioning how he might not have been as clutch as JW, and I don't think anybody in Syracuse history is as clutch as John Wallace was, but let's remember the game. It must have been 1989, maybe 90. Georgetown came to the Dome. It was the game Thompson got thrown out in the first half, John Thompson, and Billy Owens went to the free throw line and sank a pair, was it 2 or 3 free throws to send it into overtime in a game that Syracuse eventually won.
Donnie, you were there, weren't you?
I was at that game. I was young, but I was there.
I was there as well, Tony. I was sitting behind the basket, behind the Georgetown side basket.
We were in the student section that was on the side of the court. Remember, they used to have the student section right across from the benches, and we're sitting there, and so I had pretty good seats for that game.
Great game, and Billy O came through that game big time.
He did. He was my favorite player for a long time, and I certainly would have taken him if he wasn't off the board, but it sounds like he wouldn't have gotten past Brad either.
Speaking of Brad, what you got?
No, you're right. Billy Owens, I would have snapped him up without even thinking twice about it. But moving on, I guess. I need a guy for my point guard to throw alley-oops to. This guy, one of the best dunkers in the history of Syracuse basketball, I think we'd all agree. And a guy who will hold a special place in everybody's heart because of the block. I'm talking about Hakeem Warwick.
Wow.
And it's unfortunate that I wouldn't say only, but that he's most remembered for the block, because that came in his sophomore season. And for 2 years after that, he was a tremendous player. As a senior, first team AP All-American. As a junior, third team AP All-American. What is he? Fifth leading scorer in the history of the program. Had a very successful NBA career. Is a great member of Boeheim's Army to this day, which I have great respect for. And I think Hakeem Warwick, between he and Gerry Mcnamara, really led some challenging teams after the national championship. With those two guys, and there wasn't a whole lot around them, and they were really the core of that program for a good many years after the national championship. And I love Hakeem Warwick, and I love everything that he brought to this team. And so I'm happy to take him with my second pick. And I've got a Sherman Douglass to Hakeem Warwick alley-oop tandem that I will go to all day long.
He was so long, and I know the block gets so much attention, as well it should. I mean, I love to look at that play and look at where Warwick is before the ball is passed from the top of the key out to the wing, to see the amount of ground he covers before he takes off, and then, of course, when he extends that arm and blocks the shot. It's just such a phenomenal athletic play. And, we talk about all of these guys with the big wingspans that Boeheim likes to recruit, and that's why, to make plays like that. And I also love the way he played with his back to the basket, and the footwork that he had was phenomenal. I love to watch Hakeem Warwick play basketball.
As a guy who wasn't, a big, thick guy, but could just have his way inside against guys that were, in many cases, stronger than he was.
Yeah. He went a little earlier than I thought he would, but there's so many good choices, and yeah, I love his game. Love his game. All right, Tani, the number 8 pick. We've had a lot of forwards go, a lot of foremen.
Yep.
Right, a lot of power forwards. Derrick Coleman, John Wallace, Billy Owens, Hakeem Warwick.
Well, and I gotta go with a guard here. And I mean, this player, we're going back a ways now, but it's hard to steer away from the player that Boeheim calls the best player to ever play at Syracuse, and that's Dave Bing. You know, a little before my time in terms of being able to watch him play, but certainly the numbers are pretty outstanding, and the way that he is viewed by Jim Boeheim, because we've certainly heard him talk about him many times. Anytime anybody brings up Boeheim's playing career, he immediately refers to, well, the only reason he ever scored any points was because of Dave Bing. And he averaged 24.8 points a game during his career at Syracuse.
28 his senior year. That's absurd.
Yeah, and 3 years for Dave Bing, too, because back then freshmen didn't play. And my father went to Syracuse with Jim Boeheim and Dave Bing at the same time, and he said that they used to play the games at the Syracuse War Memorial, and Dave Bing's freshman year and Boeheim's freshman year, the place would be packed for the freshman game, and then they'd all pull out and wouldn't watch the varsity team because they were so terrible. Really, before Bing arrived, Syracuse basketball was a laughingstock of the country. They were terrible, and he, along with Boeheim, kind of single-handedly turned that around and gave them national respect. So, but no problem picking Dave Bing, Tony.
And the other thing with Bing, I mean, again, we don't necessarily put NBA career as part of the choice, but it's a measure of how good you are in college too. The fact that he was the number 2 pick in the NBA draft, so only Derrick Coleman was drafted higher, and he went on and did have a very, very good NBA career.
And the mayor of Detroit.
And then and that's the next thing I was going to go with, right? And he's obviously a very successful guy off the court because he goes on to be the mayor of Detroit, a major U.S. city.
And we do know that the other player on my team, Carmelo, should have been drafted by Detroit with the number 2 overall pick as well in the NBA draft.
True.
Instead, it was Darko Milicic?
Darko Milicic, yes.
Yeah. No, Dave Bing is tremendous. And that looks pretty nice, Tony, when you look at 1-2 on your roster right now, and you have Carmelo Anthony and Dave Bing. Wow. All right. I am ecstatic that this guy has fallen to me at number 9. I was afraid he was going to be gone by now. I don't think there's a player that I love more in terms of his game in watching him play. It's hard to pick which moment for him. The first moment, 6 3-pointers in the first half against the University of Kansas in the 2003 National Championship game. One of which was the ultimate heat check that he hit. I still remember that long 3 from kind of between the wing and the top of the key on the right side and going right to left in the first half. And then, of course, the Big East tournament run in 2006, where he put the team on his back. He hit the ridiculous buzzer beater against Cincinnati to win, goes on to beat UConn and Georgetown and Pitt, and had clutch shots in 2 more of those games. And, I mean, it was the ultimate it was the first time a Big East team won 4 games to win the championship. And he was scrappy. He was an amazing shooter. He's, who knows, could be the next coach of Syracuse basketball.
So who is it? Who are you picking?
The pride of Pennsylvania. Number 3, Gerry Mcnamara.
Yeah, and you didn't mention, Brendan, with all those accolades, first half of that Kansas game in 2003 national championship game, Gerry McNamara gave us the cushion we needed to bring home Boeheim's first national title. I mean,
don't forget his 43 points in an NCAA tournament game.
He dumped a 43 spot. I was listening on the radio. I was in Buffalo watching tournament games, and between sessions, I was listening on the radio and he just kept hitting 3 after. I think he had 8 threes that game. 43 against BYU. That was, what was that, 2004? Yeah, 2004. So,
and still with the program.
Number 1 in 3-pointers with 400. First in minutes. He was a workhorse. Highest free throw percentage at 89%. Second in steals, 3rd in assists, and 4th in scoring. That's a hell of a resume. G-Man.
For little Gerry Mcnamara from Scranton, Pennsylvania. Really.
They wouldn't have won one effing game.
Not an entire year.
Oh, man. Oh, I'm excited.
Can you believe, though, that Boeheim had to say that about Gerry Mcnamara? Because fans were getting, the fans were getting on him, saying that he was overrated. You kidding me?
For half the season.
Yeah. And that makes it more amazing that he went on the run in the Big East tournament. And then remember, he got hurt and they lost in the Texas A&M in the first round. But greatest Big East tournament championship that year, I would say. And I know there's been a few, but that's the one people think of.
I agree.
Good pick.
All right. Ekis, you only get one here, and then we're going to go the same order.
Then I go again.
Yep. So it is here.
Well, I need to start scoring some points, so I'm going to go ahead and pick the guy who's got the most of them. And I'm going to go with Lawrence Moten. And, he was just so smooth. I love the nickname's great.
Poetry and Moten.
Just such a smooth basketball player. And I need a lot of points, so we're going to get him from him.
You got Ekis has the style team going so far, right? He's got Pearl Washington, who's, the showboat point guard, and Lawrence Moten in his knee-high socks. I love it.
Yeah, that's right. I dug the socks.
Love it.
Well, the best news is that I get to pick again already.
Yeah, Lawrence Moten, just real quick, 2,334 points, all-time leading scorer. And I thought this was cool. Marquette's Marcus Howard set the Big East all-time scoring record this year, and they brought in Lawrence Moten for the game just kind of as a passing of the torch, even though, of course, Syracuse isn't part of the Big East anymore. So he's another one of these guys. He was Big East Freshman of the Year and then first team 3 times after that. So just an incredible career, incredible player.
Well, this is probably the toughest decision that anybody's had. I think at this point we're beyond the obvious picks, maybe. No, I'm not going to go with Richard Manning or George Papadakis. I need a center, though. I do need a center, and this is what's presenting a problem for me here. I also need a point guard, but looking at the draft board, a couple of the best ones are gone, so I'm going to hold off on that. I am going to go with a center, and this was tough because there's so many great centers, but I'm going old school. I'm not going Danny Shays. I'm throwing out a lot of names, but I'm going Roosevelt Bowie, the original Syracuse big man, and my team really has a Northeastern and Section 5 flair. Kendall High School.
Kendall.
Roosevelt Bowie's going to be my third pick.
That's pretty amazing.
One talent from Kendall.
A player like that came from Little Kendall, in terms of the impact that he had on the program. I know Boeheim talks a lot about, landing Bowie and Orr as recruits was essential for Syracuse to being a successful program in the Boeheim era taking off. That doesn't happen, and Boeheim doesn't have the court named after. That's for sure.
It's funny reading Boeheim's book, some of the schools that he was going against to recruit Roosevelt Bowie, like St. Bonaventure, and the landscape of basketball back then. It was so fragmented. So Bowie came in before the Big East was formed, when Syracuse was probably a member of the ECAC, and it was a very regionalized sport. And then I think that his senior year would have been the second year of the Big East Conference, or was that the inaugural rule?
First year.
79-80, yeah.
79-80.
And he averaged 13.2 points on his career, over 15 both his junior and senior year. Solid free throw percentage, solid field goals, great rebounder, defensive presence in the middle of that zone. Although back then Boeheim didn't play the zone, but this iteration of the team I'm drafting is going to play the zone, and Roosevelt Bowie is smart enough to adapt. So he's my center.
Couple other tidbits. Second all-time in block shots at Syracuse. Averaged almost 3 a game, behind only Etan Thomas. 4 times he blocked 8 shots in a game, which is absurd. He's 7th all-time in rebounding, He's 4th in field goal percentage, and he's the number 2 all-time scoring center behind Rony Seikaly. And how about this? Louis and Bowie, their 4-year record, 118. 100 wins and 18 losses. That's pretty good. Pretty good.
And that's before the era of, the Big East Conference and the ESPN television and, everything, Carrier Dome, everything that goes around with it. But, of course, Manley Fieldhouse, they picked up a lot of those wins at home in the zoo at Manley Fieldhouse.
Yeah. So Jim's front line right now, ladies and gentlemen, John Wallace, Billy Owens, and Roosevelt Bowie. Pretty strong. Pretty strong, Jim.
Thank you. I need some guards.
Yeah, now you need some guys in the backcourt to handle the rock, but there's still a lot of good guards out there, that's for sure. So, all right. So we are, again, going the same order in round 3. So, Brad, you have the 12th pick.
Yeah, like Jim said, it's a different tier of player, I think, kind of after the first 2 rounds. And you could really go a lot of different ways with this next tier of guys, all of them who would benefit your team in immense ways. But there's one guy to me that stands out in a limited sample size, but because he was so elite in his 1 year at Syracuse, I couldn't ignore it, and that's Wes Johnson. Wes Johnson was a first-team All-American in his 1 year at Syracuse. Could have been the best player on the team in his redshirt year after he had transferred over from Iowa State. But by the time he got in, was a dominant player, has one of the top 10 single season scoring marks in the Big East era for Syracuse. 16, 17 points a game, 8 or 9 rebounds a game, 2 assists, 2 blocks, 2 steals a game. I mean, he really could do it all. You talk about, recent guys like Elijah Hughes or Tyus Battle. And to me, they're the sort of closest comparisons you have in terms of a complete player to Wes Johnson. But Wes Johnson was leaps and bounds better than those guys. And I think we kind of forget how great he was because he's bounced around a little bit in the NBA. But, man, was he good when he was at Syracuse. And it's a bit dicey to go with a guy who's got just a 1-year sample size. But I think he made such a mark on this program in that year that I've got to take him.
All right. I like it. Wes Johnson goes to Brad. I really, I'm not just saying this with these picks. Like, that's what's so much fun about this. I mean, these are all great players. I know we are kind of going down maybe to the next tier, but he was a hell of a player in the 1 year he was at Syracuse. All right, Tani, who has so far picked Carmelo Anthony at the forward spot and Dave Bing at one of his guard spots. You are on the clock.
Well, I'm going to go with the center here also, and I got to go with one of the players that I really enjoyed watching a lot when I was a kid. Of course, caught my attention, in the 80s, and that's Rony Seikaly, who was one of the best rebounding and defensive centers that Syracuse had, could score points, and went on to have a pretty strong NBA career also.
Yeah, good pick. So Rony Seikaly, who, if you look at that, I mean, Coleman we talked about early, but in terms of the run that Syracuse made in '87, a lot of that had to do with Rony Seikaly. He had just an incredible tournament. The win in the Elite Eight over North Carolina, he had a great game. And it started early in the tournament. He had 33 against Florida, and then he had 26 and 11 against North Carolina. And then, of course, they come up just the 1 point shy in the national championship game. So Rony Seikaly, all-time leading scorer among centers at Syracuse, second all-time in rebounds behind Coleman, and tied for third in blocks. That's a pretty good center you got there, Tommy.
Rony Seikaly had an extraordinary run in that '87 tournament, averaged 20+ per game in that run. I mean, he dominated. It was a joke because the Florida had a center named Dwayne Shinsis.
Yeah,
had a little buzz cut kind of guy and was talking a lot of junk before that game. Thought he was a better player, and Rony Seikaly eviscerated that guy. It was so much fun to watch him dominate through that run.
Unique dunking style too, Seikaly. He would almost do a pull up on the rim. It was unheard of in those days. He'd pull his knees right up. The original Greek Freak.
Yeah. That puts me on the clock, and this is the first truly hard pick for me. The first two were no-brainers for me, with Derrick Coleman and Gerry Mcnamara. There's a few different ways I can go here. There's a couple guys I like at center, but I think they'll still be there coming back. Defense is really, really important to me. And
oh man,
the first two guys I have, Coleman's a banger. Gerry is tenacious on defense with steals. He's a pretty good defensive player. But my backcourt, I'm really going to like this. Of course, McNamara can play the 1 or the 2, but I want Gerry at the 2, and I want Jason Hart as my point guard. Career steals leader at Syracuse with 329 steals. He led the team in steals every single season he was there, and he's second in career assists behind only Sherman General. He's also a workhorse. I have now on my team the guys with the most minutes and third most minutes in SU history. Actually, I'm sorry, I have all three. I now have 1, 2, and 3. I got the Iron Man team. McNamara and Coleman and now Jason Hart are 1, 2, 3 minutes.
You just need 5 guys.
So, yeah. Anyway.
I was holding it off for him maybe next round, hoping I'd get him for my point guard because you're going to have shooters, right? You do need that defensive element, but I still got a couple point guards in mind, so I'm not worried.
He's a great defensive player. He can also dish the rock, baby. Of course, a weakness with him is going to be his outside shot, but I got Gerry, and we'll see what I do later on. So, Jason Hart for me. All right, where are we at here? Ekis,
Dave
back
for
to
2
you again, right?
Back to me.
Ekis, last pick, number 15, and then you get to come around with number 16. So you get 2 picks here, and we'll be going with Snake the rest of the way.
I'm going to start building my my front court, I guess. I'm going to go with the center. Just a monster in the middle. If you wanted to drive into the lane, God help you. You're most likely to dish out. But Eton Thomas was like scary in the middle. Just a shot blocker, rebounder. Had some good post moves and stuff like that. But he was a defensive force for me, and I'd like to stick him in the middle of that, back of that 2-3.
There were 2 other guys I was looking at. He was one of them. If I went center, I was going to go Eton Thomas. Good pick. Yeah, all-time leading shot blocker at Syracuse, but he could also score 1,300 career points, 1,340, 11 points per game. And then he was the 12th overall pick in the first round of the Dallas Mavericks in the 2000 draft. So he was, and he's still involved with some media stuff too. So Eton Thomas goes to Ekis, and then Dave, you get another one here.
All right, I might be jumping a little bit for this one. All right. I'm going to go with CJ Fair.
Oh!
All right.
Oh!
You know he made a good pick.
So he was so good. It's hard to put into words. He had hops. He developed kind of like a mid to long range game towards the end of his career. I mean, I wouldn't mind if he shot the 3 a little bit. He's a good guy at the bottom of the 2-3 that could even sneak up to the front if he needed to every once in a while. I loved lefty, loved CJ Fair, loved his game. Happy to have him.
Yeah, he's one of the most likable guys in Syracuse history, in my mind. He was just a great kid and, tough, and the way his game developed from freshman to senior year, and the dunk against Georgetown was one of the greatest things I've ever seen.
I can tell you, my 16-year-old son still has that as his background in his Google mail.
Nice.
It happened when he was like 9, and he still has it because he loves it so much.
Made everybody want to wear headbands when they played basketball.
Yeah.
Good picks. Thomas and Fair on the turn.
It is to me, and I'm trying not to hit the panic button and figure out what direction I want to go here. Because that is the guy that I was hoping I would get coming back. Nice pick, Dee. All right, so looking at my board, I am right now looking at I need a center and I need a swingman. I need a 3. So I'm looking center. I feel like there's a little bit of a drop off after Eton Thomas. So I'm thinking I might head in the swingman direction. But then there's another guy, I think, in the front court. Oh, this is the first one where I'm definitely a little bit torn. And you notice I'm stalling a little bit here.
Clock's running.
All right. I am going to pick. This might be a little bit of a surprise. A guy who has an award named after him in Bill Simmons' Rewatchables podcast. It's called the Dion Waiters Award. The Dion Waiters Award is for whoever comes in the game and has the biggest heat check. And, of course, Dion Waiters never started a game at Syracuse. He was only there for 2 years. But I need a guy who's a big guard, kind of a swingman a little bit, and can come in and kind of change the flow of the game. So I'm going to take Dion Waiters.
He's going to poison your team.
He is.
I don't see him and Coleman getting along.
Away from the gummies.
Coleman and Dion Waiters? Yeah, that I could have some issues. Jerry's gonna make sure everybody gets along. All right.
Well, so I guess that puts me on the clock, and I'm gonna take, I think, one of the best shooters that Syracuse has ever had. And that's a swingman. He can play guard, he can play forward, but really smooth shooter. I'm going to take Preston Shumpert.
Nice.
Speaking of a guy who could be an issue sometimes. Didn't he and Damone Brown get the fight
Sean
one?
Williams to go along with him, believe me.
Yeah. Preston Shumpert, you forget about him sometimes. He's a great player.
Great scorer.
Yeah, he is Prince 8th all-time in scoring at 1,907 points, 4th all-time in three-pointers as well. Was part of that 2000 team that made a run to the Sweet 16. So there you go. Good pick, Tony. All right. We are to Brad, I believe, right?
Yep.
Yes. So I'm going to go with a guy who was probably a little before his time. Was we were talking about our earliest Syracuse memory, and probably one of my earliest Syracuse memories happened in 1981 at the Carrier Dome, Big East Final, triple overtime game, and this guy hit the game-winning shot for the first Big East title for Syracuse, and that's Leo Routens. Leo Routens was a guy to me who epitomized what it means to be a basketball player. He literally could do all of it. He would rebound, he would pass, and he was a scorer. He only was at Syracuse for 3 years, transferred in.
Yeah.
From Minnesota.
A great legacy to this team. Was a first-round draft pick of the Sixers, went about 17th, if I remember right. And so he was well regarded coming out of school, but as a big man was such a great passer and could see the court so well. And that's a guy that could he could play any number of positions. And really, was one of the guys that really brought this program into the Big East and into national recognition. They won that game at the Carrier Dome to win that Big East title. And that was probably the first sort of, recognition that the Big East got as a conference in that tournament and the excitement that brought. And then from there, they went to the Garden because they needed a bigger stage. And so he did a lot to not even to build this program, but to build a Big East. And he also had a son that was a pretty good player for this program as well. So he.
I don't know if you knew that. I don't know if people knew that.
So I'm going with the guy who I remember fondly. Met him when I was about 8 years old at the Syracuse airport. Shook his hand. Couldn't have been nicer to a little punk, snotty-nosed kid like me. Leo Routens.
Yeah,
he
Brad.
Also started the Canadian pipeline, right? And when you think about some of the the Canadians that have come and made an impact for Syracuse. But, he was a transfer. MVP of the 1981 Big East tournament with a tip-in to beat Villanova. I love it. And
journeyman in the NBA. And now he's become like the father of Canadian basketball. He's like headed up the national team in Canada for several years. I don't know if he's still doing that, but
17th overall pick by the Philadelphia 76ers in first-round pick. So there you go. And just throwing it out there, he might not be the last Routens pick tonight. I think Andy's on my board. I don't know. We'll see. All right. So, Leo Routens. All right, we are too. But it feels like it's been forever, Jim, since you've gotten to go.
I get to go twice. I've already made my picks, and I put them both in the board, so I'm going to show them to you. It's not going to take very long at all. But one last thought on Leo Routens. That guy was from an era when I must have been, 4th or 5th grade, and Syracuse basketball players would annually come to, like, the SMS Lodge in Seneca Falls or, the high school cafeteria and do a, talk to the kids and sometimes a clinic. I mean, it happened all the time. Some of these players that we saw, Brad, when we were younger. Joe Morris came to the SMS once.
Saturday morning, and there's a Syracuse guy ready to lead you for an hour in drills.
And it was just a different era before everything got so, big. That would never happen nowadays. And back then it was like an annual occurrence. I remember even meeting Ed Pinkney. Or was it Dwayne McClain?
Oh, Dwayne McClain.
Dwayne McClain, right. He came to Seneca Falls. What the heck?
The intermediate school playground. We're in the back shoddy playground behind the school.
So anyways, I've got my picks. And by the way, when Dwayne McClain came, I told him my favorite player was Leo Routens, and I really think it annoyed him a little bit. So back-to-back picks. I got John Wallace, Billy Owens, and Roosevelt Bowie. I'm going old school with a fairly new school player with these next two picks. With my 4th-round pick, I'm going with Raphael Addison. And my 5th-round pick, I'm going with Eric Devendorf over some other players from his same era that could make a case. But you know what? I want Devo's swagger. He was the guy that could put the ball in the basket when you absolutely needed it, afraid of nothing. He's going to be great for my team chemistry. And Raphael Addison, probably one of the more overlooked players in Syracuse history because he played with the Pearl. And then immediately after his graduation, Syracuse had ushered in the era of Derrick Coleman and Billy Owens and Sherman Douglass and all those guys. But Raphael Addison was a legit player, and he played 10, 12 years in the NBA, number 10 all-time on the school scoring list. So Raphael Addison, and then my second pick, Devendorf, was 14 on the all-time scoring list. So I think I did pretty good here in the 3rd and 4th rounds of our little draft.
So if that's your starting teams, you got Wallace and Owens up front with Bowie, and then I guess Addison, who's kind of a swingman, right? He could play in the backcourt.
I'm going to be big. I'm going to be big at the 2 and 3, but that's not my starting lineup. I'm just drafting for value. I still got to get my point guard, and there are plenty of great Cuse point guards out there right now to choose who's going to lead this team. So I'm good. That's not my starting lineup, though.
Hey, I thought about Devendorf because every team needs an MFer. I don't know if I can say that, Jim. But you need that guy, right, with a chip on his shoulder who's going to mix it up with the other team, but hopefully not, cross the line to cost you technical. And, of course, with Devendorf, I always think about the shot. For a shot that didn't count, does he have the biggest shot that didn't count in Syracuse history with the three-pointer that would have won him the game, but instead it goes on to be the greatest game in Big East history, the 6 overtime game.
In retrospect, glad it didn't count.
Right? It was a heck of a shot. And the jump onto the scores table was pretty awesome, too. So. All right. So we're coming back down. Brad, you got right now Sherman Douglass is your point guard. You got Hakeem Warwick, Wes Johnson, and Leo Routens.
Yeah, I was disappointed that Jim took Raphael Addison, and we talked about how Jim's irrational love for Pearl Washington when we were kids. And, Pearl and Raph Addison played on that same team, and Jim was a guard, and I was more of a bigger kid, and I always idolized Raph Addison, so I really wanted to have him on my team. So, we may try and work a trade later for that one. But I'll go old school as well with my pick. I need a big man. I need a center, but like Brendan, you said, it's there's some time. There's a bit of a drop off. So I want to go with a guy who is just a unique talent in the history of this program. And he's the guy that doesn't really have a position. He was just a basketball player and an athlete and an elite talent that this program will always fondly remember, Stevie Thompson. And
love it.
You probably think of him as a shooting guard, but he couldn't shoot. He was a terrible shooter. But man, could he get to the rim at about 6'3", was just the best leaper you'll ever see in this program. Could get up probably to the top of the backboard, was the recipient of so many alley-oops from Sherman Douglass, and I'm glad to have that tandem back together again. And he, for his size, an extraordinary rebounder, just because of his leaping ability, understood the game, and he was a great cog in that 87 team, as well as all the way through to 1990. I mean, he and Derrick Coleman shared 4 years, and that team was great for every year of those 4 years. So I'm ecstatic to have Stevie Thompson fall to me at my fifth pick.
You just had to hope that nobody ever fouls him.
No, you keep him off the floor in late games.
Yep, 52%, or I guess 53% career free throw shooter. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize he's the 7th all-time leading scorer. Just came shy of 2,000 points. 98 double-figure scoring games.
Shocking considering who he played with, right? He would be the guy that he's not. I always remember him as a slasher and a great dunker and and a horrible shooter, but just great athlete to have on the court. But 7th all-time leading scorer, that wouldn't be the first thing that came to mind.
Mm-hmm. The first thing that comes to mind with Stevie Thompson for me, just a little thing. He always had that little piece of it looked like black tape on one side of his jersey. Does anyone remember that? He had a little piece of tape on his jersey. But I guess that's just me.
I remember him catching that between the legs pass from Sherman Douglass and dunking it on Bobby Knight in Madison Square Garden, and totally blew them off the court that game.
Yeah. All right. So Stevie Thompson goes to Brad. And Tani, you have Dave Bing and Preston Shumpert in the backcourt. You got Rony Seikaly as your center and Carmelo Anthony as your 3.
Yeah, so it's got me thinking about that 4 spot, Brendan. And, I'm going to go with the first player that Jim Boeheim really ever recruited to Syracuse from Cincinnati, and I'm going to take Louis Orr.
Louis and Bowie, his show is complete. I was looking at him when I made my last pick. Yep. So Louis Orr.
Not going to be reunited on this fantasy board.
Yep.
With
6'8", out of Cincinnati. 27th all-time in scoring, 4 straight NCAA tournaments. We talked about their record before, 114 or 118. And then he went on to a very successful coaching career. Of course, think about him coaching at Seton Hall in the Big East. So
you don't want to talk about where he is today, helping Patrick Ewing at Georgetown.
Yeah,
but Patrick Ewing, who is
hopefully keeping some distance from Patrick Ewing,
at least 6 feet apart.
Yeah. All right, outstanding. All right, I am on the clock, and I need a big man, and I need some old school on my team. So I am going to go also with some hometown flavor as well out of JD, 6'11", 235 pound, went on to the longest end.
Uh-oh.
We'd lose him.
Looks like we lost Brendan.
I'm sure it was about to be great.
It didn't seem like it was.
Suspense is killing me.
Hopefully he can reconnect here. Does that mean we get to skip him?
Can we piece it together with what he already said?
He said it from Jamesville to Witt, so I think we should give him Juwan Coleman.
Yeah, Coleman.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, is he talking about Coleman?
All right, how about you guys got me back?
Yeah, you're back. We were speculating. We gave you Juwan Coleman.
Because you said
JB Reef Snyder. Is that who you wanted?
All right. So I was getting ready to text you because I didn't trust you guys to not skip me. I'm going to go with Danny Shays. before I cut out again.
Oh, wow.
Danny Shays, longest NBA career. Once Louis and Bowie were gone, had a great senior season. Might not have the numbers of some of these other guys, but I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that he was blocked from playing time from those guys. So he was drafted in the first round of the 81 draft, was first team All Big East his senior year. So I'm going to take Danny Shays.
There you go. Ushered in the Carrier Dome era.
I left you speechless.
Well, Dave's up for 2 now, so he's probably thinking.
All right, Ekis, you're up for 2.
Okay, I'm thinking a little bit outside the box here. I'm going to go with a player who was a one-hit wonder. It was kind of disappointing that he left after one season, but I really liked his game. Really about the most modern Syracuse player that I can think of in recent, just super tall, shoots a 3. I'm going Dante Green. He was like, it was like KD, he's 6'11", but he's taking 7 3-pointers a game. He's, making 35% of them, but I really liked his game. I thought he was a good basketball player. Again, I wish he would have stuck around a little bit longer, but if we're just playing one game, I think he's probably one of the, better guys to have on the court.
Second most points as a freshman in Syracuse history, behind only Carmelo Anthony. Of course, wasn't on a team. He was on a team that didn't even make the NCAA tournament, and then didn't really.
We're discounting that all.
One thing about Dante is, he was talented, but I did not like Dante. He started that dynasty sign that they would do, and then they didn't even make the NCAA tournament. When he went pro, I wasn't too as upset, let's say, as I was when Pearl went pro.
Right.
Not a big Dante Green fan. There's 3 or 4 Orange men that were pretty good statistically that wasn't a fan of, and old Dante wasn't one of them. So when our teams play, Dave, I'm gonna have Roosevelt Bowie take him out.
Okay. All right. He's gonna go out to the 3. He's gonna go out to the 3 arc.
Yeah, I'm gonna send my whole and Devo too.
Okay.
Outstanding. All right, Ekis, you get another one, right?
I get another one. All right. Let's see. I am going to go with.
This is where it starts to get hard.
Yeah, I know. A lot of these players are, probably the last 10, 15 years. I remember them more than any of the guys I heard about in the 70s and 80s. But I feel pretty good about this one because he's like a combo guy, like a point forward type player. Would bring the ball up the court when he needed him to, but was kind of a taller player, good defender. Michael Benajay.
Oh,
Michael Benajay, Silent G. I like it.
What's nice about him is you can use him as point guard, which he was a great point guard, but you can use him at 3 or 4 other spots too.
Yeah, he was a very versatile player. He played all over the place. I know he came, started at Duke, and we benefited from him not working out there, and I think he had a great career at Syracuse. And
like it, I love it. All right. That puts me on the clock again. And I got a few different ways I can go here. Now, you get to the point now where you can start thinking about who are guys you want, who are some guys who could come off the bench and be a spark. I have, of course, the ultimate 6-man in Dion Waiters, so this could be a guy that could make it into the starting lineup for me. So many tough calls here. I'm going to go with a guy who, when you talk about getting teams to Final Fours, I mean, this guy really got Syracuse to a Final Four. He got Syracuse to our most recent Final Four. That's Malachi Richardson.
Yeah.
One season, averaged, just 13 points per game. But when he got hot, there's another guy who's a McDonald's All-American. But I'm looking for kind of a swing guy, 6'6", can play the 2, can play the 3. He wound up getting drafted in the first round of the NBA draft. And, the game, his effort against Virginia, I still can't believe Syracuse won that game. I really can't. That Virginia team, I thought for sure was going to win. So I'm going to take Malachi Richardson. This is hard.
Yeah.
This part of the draft is really hard.
Maybe for some of you. For me, looking at my team and thinking about players, I'm going to take I'm feeling the need to have a point guard, but I want somebody who's a strong defensive player as well, could shoot from the outside, and a part of the Syracuse coaching staff to this day, and I'm going to take the alliterative Adrian Autry.
Oh, man, heartbreaking. That was going to be my point guard.
So Adrian Autry off the board. And I'm going to let my ignorance be known here. Was Bing considered like a combo guard or a pure shooting guard or a point guard? We know?
Geez, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Call your dad real quick.
Just look at his profile. I think it sounds like he could play both. But anyway, Adrian Autry.
That team, he probably had to do it all.
He'll be better off the ball with a guy like Autry at the point.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, yeah.
He was who I was waiting on. This round I was going to take him. Tane.
Sorry to do that to you, Jim, but I needed one as well.
I got another one, though.
Brad is on the clock.
All right. So I've got some prototypical Boeheim forwards, long and lean. I need a guy with some muscle. And there's several guys I can choose from, but I need somebody that can rebound, and I need someone that can defend and that can anchor the inside. And here's a guy, didn't always play the center spot, wasn't always back to the basket, but was ferocious inside, solid rebounder, strong. Junior and senior year, he was an outstanding player. And it's Rick Jackson.
Oh, I thought about him.
Yeah.
And he's going to be the muscle that, Hakeem Warwick, we talked about his footwork, but, a big center could bounce him around a little bit. Wes Johnson and Leo Routen's probably the same way, but Rick Jackson's going to be the enforcer in there that's going to take care of business.
If I could have Jackson's final year, that was one of the best years that any Syracuse player ever had. But he would only go one way, He never developed going the opposite way, and still people couldn't seem to stop him. He single-handedly made that a great team.
He was first one of those guys, and for a lot of years, Syracuse bigs would take a while to get themselves together. There's several guys you can point to that are like that, where the freshman, sophomore year, it takes them a while to develop by the time you get to junior, senior year. And, Bernie Fine's become a bit of a punchline, but his work with big men and Rick Jackson, and, he was one of the best that he was able to develop into an elite center in this program.
First of the Newman Goretti guys to go out of Philadelphia, of course, Rick Jackson and Scoop Jardine. The other thing I was going to say is one of my favorite Syracuse teams of all time to watch was the 2010 team, the 09-10 team that had Jackson and Onuaku. I love having the two big guys inside, can play with their back to the basket. I thought really complemented each other well. And that was the year Onuaku got hurt going into the NCAA tournament. And I think if they lose to Georgetown in the Big East and he gets hurt, if he doesn't get hurt, man, I'll take that team to go a long way in that tournament.
That still makes me sick.
They're in the Final Four, if not further, if Onuaku doesn't get hurt.
Yep. Against Georgetown.
Ugh, just brutal.
We'll lose to a Butler team that then went on to the finals and one of the more brutal final games.
Yeah.
The second straight year, the Butler team the year before had that great final against Duke where they missed the half-court shot that would have won it, right? But then that final was awful. Yeah, of course, freaking UConn has to win. Oh, vomit now. Ugh. I'm trying to keep up with my picks here. Ekis, who did you have in the last round?
Benajay.
Benajay, that's right.
I got the board right up on the screen right now for you.
Yeah, awesome. Silent G. I'm just going to write Silent G. All right. Jim, I think we're on you, right?
Yeah, for 2, right?
For 2.
So I'm going to get my point guard this round, and with Autry gone, that brings up a dilemma for me because there's a few. The 2 I'm deciding against, and I'll just tell you because I probably won't end up with both of them. Or, I could possibly take both of them right now.
Yeah, well,
I'm deciding between Johnny Flynn and Michael Carter Williams. And
you could be like when Johnny Flynn got drafted with Ricky Rubio and take 2 point guards. Just like, was it Minnesota that did that?
Minnesota.
Yeah.
well, I would have a strong tandem, and unfortunately, Johnny Flynn hurt his back early in his NBA career and never really got a shot. But he was really something special. But those teams that he was on, as awesome as they were, and that includes the 6 overtime game against UConn, they weren't as winning of teams as the sophomore year of Michael Carter Williams. And you know what? If Boeheim's coaching these guys, I think that Michael Carter Williams at the top of that zone, that was the best Syracuse defensive team of all time. So I'm going to go with 6th, Michael Carter Williams, and there's no way his name's going to fit in here, so I'm going to just put MCW, even though I've got everybody else's full name. And then I'm just going to need a brief moment to consider whether I want to take Johnny Flynn or not. I almost want to take Paul Harris, but he's not of that caliber, but I love Paul Harris.
You were going to go tandem. You go Johnny Flynn and Paul Harris. Aren't they?
Yeah. Which workhorse from the 2009 6 overtime game do you want, right? Of course, I think of Paul Harris getting stuck by the rim 3 times.
I just think about Paul Harris just getting dressed down by Boeheim all the time.
Poor guy. I loved him. He missed that shot against in the second or third overtime against UConn that game. He had a couple of layups he blew.
Oh yeah. But he hung in there.
Still scored about 30, but
yeah. What was it? Johnny Flynn went 16 of 16 from the free throw line in that game. That's just unbelievable. I know he hasn't been picked yet.
Yeah, but he's about to be. I mean, I'm thinking about some of the other guys I might take, and none of them are the talent that Johnny Flynn was. And like you said, we're talking about how they were when they were for Syracuse. I think he could have had a great NBA career. It's one of those things how circumstances sometimes with these determines how successful an NBA career you'll have. But let's make it official. Let's go with Johnny. Did he spell his name with an H? Yeah, Johnny Flynn.
I don't think so. I think it was just
it was just 2 N's.
Jonny. Yep.
There you go, Johnny Flynn.
Those 2 guys complement each other well because, and I would have done the same thing as you, Jim. The reason that Flynn didn't win more is because I don't think he was very good defensively. He was smaller, and Michael Carter Williams at the top of the zone. Exactly. I mean, he was a tremendous defensive player. So I think you're right. If you need a little offense, bring Johnny Flynn in.
And I have these, just get a chance to show you this. Kevin Colton, who's contributed photos to Finger Lakes One for a long time, great photographer for Hobart Williams Smith for a while. He was shooting every Syracuse game. He stopped by one Christmas with these 2 frame photos. They're big. And on the right is Paul Harris dunking, and on the left is Johnny Flynn dunking. And that was one of the best presents I ever got. I love this thing. The only thing bad about it is if you'll notice they're playing Cleveland State. And in that game, Cleveland State made a half-court shot to beat. And that's one of the reasons why maybe Johnny Flynn didn't go earlier in this draft is because that team just was not a real winning team,
Yeah.
There was some story about that game. It was like the first non-conference loss they had at home since the beginning of the Aerodome or something crazy. It was like 15, 20 years they hadn't lost a non-conference game at home.
And I think that loss probably was one of the losses that kept him out of the NCAA tournament. I mean, didn't the back-to-back years of Johnny Flynn's career, did Johnny Flynn ever play in the NCAA tournament?
Never did.
No. So I mean, that's why he's in the 7th round.
Even after 6 overtime.
Johnny Flynn played in the NCAA tournament. He played the 6 overtime game, the team that went and lost to Oklahoma.
6 overtimes that year, they lost in the NIT.
No, they went on to I'm pretty sure they went on that year and lost to Oklahoma in the regionals in Memphis because I was there.
To orangehoops.org. You guys know that site?
Oh, wow.
I got the media guide open too. So
it's the holy grail of Syracuse basketball information. Orangehoops.org. Just give them a shout out. It's the best Syracuse basketball website ever created.
No way that team didn't make the NCAA tournament because they were nationally ranked in that game.
I might be thinking of the previous year. I know he played in the NIT once. I think of 2008, I remember they played in the NIT.
They beat Stephen at Boston and Arizona State in Miami, and then they lost to Oklahoma in the regionals in Memphis.
Sweet 16, 11-7 that year. The 2 previous years, NIT quarterfinals. And Yep, but anyways, I got him. I got Johnny Flynn, and I've got Michael Carter-Williams. And now I only have one more pick, and it's going to be a while.
Yeah, you'll close it out. You're going to get Mr. Irrelevant.
Sonny Spera.
All right, Brad, you are up.
All right. I am in need of a shooting guard. I've got shooters. Wes Johnson was a 40% three-point shooter, so he could definitely shoot the ball. And Sherman Douglass was an underrated shooter, I thought. But I need a guy that can extend the defense. And there may be a little bit of recency bias on this pick, but I have to go with one of the best shooters that we've seen in quite a few years that not only could shoot the ball from just distance, but can also get to the rim and was an underrated defender, and that's Elijah Hughes.
Yep.
And he, I would have loved to have another year with him, but this year was one of the, this was not a very good Syracuse team. Let's be clear. And he was able to carry this team. They were in the discussion to make the tournament, and it was as much because of him as any piece in that team. And give him another year in this program, and he could have been a 20+ per game guy, and he would have been a first 2 or 3 round pick. So I'm excited to have Elijah Hughes to extend the defense for all you guys that are going to play zone against me.
You make a great point, Brad, which is put Elijah Hughes on a team with some weapons where he's not the focus.
Yeah.
I mean, he's deadly when you leave him open, and he's got the range too. So, good pick. All right, Tane.
Oh. Struggling here.
Would you move to another room?
So I'm really torn between 2 players, and I'll just say who they are. Really torn between David Johnson, who was a player I loved watching in the 80s, who played above the rim and was just so fun to watch. And then, a couple weeks ago, I turned on ESPN, and of course, we're going through this time where there's no sports on at all, and there's a Syracuse game on, and Syracuse is playing Duke. And Jeremy Grant was playing in that game. And I just, and I was watching him play, and I just forgotten how good he was and how explosive he is and what a good rebounder and jumper he is. So 2 kind of similar players, but completely different eras. I'm going to go with a more recent player and go with Jeremy Grant.
Good pick, Tiny.
It is always fun when you kind of stumble into a guy where you're like, oh yeah, this guy was good, right? And we're fortunate enough with Syracuse, we've had a lot of good players, and especially with the one and dones, or maybe staying for 2 years, sometimes you forget about it. And Jeremy Grant was a fun player to watch. Only played 2 years for Syracuse, so that kept some of his all-time numbers down. He went in the 2nd round in the 2014 draft.
A pretty solid NBA career so far.
Yeah,
he's a contributor.
Player.
He's done very, very well. Love it. You mentioned Dave Johnson. I was thinking about Dave Johnson before. I'm still thinking about him, but looking at my team, and I need some more bulk up front. I mean, I know I got Derrick Coleman. I mean, you got to have 2 centers. If nothing else, right, we know Boeheim needs those 10 fouls to give from the center position. So I'm going to pick a guy that I mentioned before with Rick Jackson, and that's Arenze Onuaku. He was first all-time in Syracuse history in field goal percentage at 65%. He scored more than 1,200 points. He doesn't get hurt his senior year. I think they could have won it all, like I said before. Team won the Big East tournament as a freshman. He went to the NCAA tournament 3 times, Big East regular season title, 2 Sweet 16. So he's part of a bunch of really good teams. And, I want some bulk down low. I'm going to take Onuaku.
I love the pick, and those teams were so smart. I mean, those teams were just played the Boeheim system perfectly. And a lot of times I think you see Boeheim get so frustrated and almost seem to give up on teams is because they don't grasp it like that team did. And Onuaku was a huge part of it. He was there for at least 5 years, maybe 6.
It was 5, I think, because he blew out his knee, maybe. Hold on, I got it in my notes here.
He definitely redshirted his sophomore year, I think. He was there for 5 years. He was there for a long time.
Sophomore year, the 06-07 season, he redshirted with a knee injury, and so missed the entire season. So,
but another great example of a big man that was developed in the Syracuse program, because he was nowhere near as good as he finished was when he started as a freshman. He looked like, he might be one of these guys that never sees significant in him. So good pick, Brendan. Good pick.
I'm feeling good. There's one guy I really want to finish out my team. I just hope he's still there when I get back. Ekis. I don't have to wait long. That's right. So Ekis, back-to-back picks to close out your team.
All right. All right. For my second to last pick, I'm going to go with Demetrius Nichols. Solid player, scored a lot of points, could shoot the 3 a little bit. Like his game.
A little bit. 6th all-time in 3-pointers at Syracuse. Yeah, that works.
And I'm going to actually take another one. This one's killing me, and I almost don't want to say it. Because, Brendan, you and I probably talk through every Syracuse basketball game that we can. This guy felt like he played for Syracuse for 8 years, and when he left, I was actually about it. But he could shoot, and it seemed like every other game he would get a ball, he would steal it and go down, and he had really good 2-footed hops, and he would just get this random dunk every other game. So I'm going with Cooney. I'm going with Trevor Cooney for this one.
Got no problem with Trevor Cooney. He gets a bad rap.
You got some freaking snipers, man.
He's got some controversial players too, I think.
Benajay can shoot. He was over 40% 3. You got Dante Green. Nichols, I didn't realize Nichols, looking back at his numbers, he struggled his first 2 years and then really made the jump in year 3. Especially he was terrible 3-point shooter his first 2 years and then was great. And it was 42% from 3 his senior year.
It's a good team.
I struggled with that one, though. I'm not a Cooney guy. He used to drive me nuts.
He drove me absolutely nuts. I know, but he can shoot.
All right. I know exactly where I'm going, and I love a stretch 4. I love a 4-man who can hit it deep. And the biggest rap on this guy was when people were looking for him to step up and be more of a focus guy his sophomore year. He just wasn't that type of player. That's not going to be a problem on this team. Tyler Lydon, I'm going to take with my last pick. Great passer, great perimeter shooter, and he's got some size at 6'8", 205. He's going to be a tough matchup. Tyler Lydon with my last pick.
I love Tyler Lydon.
I just love him.
Player. Solid.
Great mustache.
Terrible facial hair.
All right. Love it. All right, Tani, one more to finish off.
Well, I'm going to take a player with one of the most fun names in Syracuse history. And there were times where he could be pretty frustrating, but he was a heck of a passer at times, too, and he could shoot when he needed to. And I'm going with Scoop Hardeen.
Scoop!
To round my team out.
The Newman Goretti guys are both gone.
He was great. He was one of those most frustrating players.
Oh, yeah.
But by the time he was a senior, I believe also a 5th-year senior, he was fantastic. It was one of those things where you see the guy struggle with Boeheim coaching him, and then it finally all comes together and he was one of them. I like Scoop a lot.
Yep, so Rick Jackson's teammate, and 6th all-time in assists for Syracuse. He's also a 1,000-point scorer. And, 2 really good teams, his sophomore year, his senior year, Big East regular season teams that, if it's not for Fab Mello and Onuaku we talked about, those are national championship contenders. So, outstanding. All right, we're getting down there. Brad.
All right. The one thing I need is a backup point guard. I've got some size. I've got shooters now, but I need a guy to spell Sherman Douglass. He can't play 40 minutes a game for me. So
yeah.
Well, and so there's been a run on point guards, but man, this program has a lot of good point guards, and that's the thing that I was worried that I wouldn't get a good one, and I shouldn't have been worried at all because. Without spoiling, Jim's got 1 pick left, but I mean, I'm going down the list of there's good point guards that won't get picked. Lazarus Sims and Eddie Moss going way back. And
I think I know where you're going.
Jimmy Lee
Waldron was a great point guard. Alan Griffin was the last Syracuse guy to have a triple-double in this program. So, and as assistant coach now, I mean, there's great point guards. But the one guy that stands out to me is
Josh Wright. You taking Josh Wright?
So on my list here, I've got a list of point guards, and Josh Wright is literally the last guy I wrote, and that was by design. So no, not Josh Wright, okay. And not James Diaz either.
Is he a one and done?
He is a one and done,
yep.
And he's a guy that, man, his 1 year was one to be remembered. And the guy is Tyler Ennis.
Yep.
And I think we all remember that team that started 25-0. And he hit the shot against Pitt. That game was on ESPN here a couple weeks ago, and I dropped everything to watch that game. Brought everybody in to watch it with me. Like, you got to wait. You see, my daughter hates basketball. She came in, I made her watch it.
Kept the winning streak alive.
Yep, that was win 24 out of the 25-game streak. And he was such a heady point guard. Just couldn't be rattled as a freshman to do the things that he did. I mean, you look at the guys that have been point guard for this team. Take Pearl aside. Johnny Flynn was solid as a freshman, but was definitely better as a sophomore. Carter Williams didn't even play barely as a freshman. Benajay wasn't here as a freshman. Jason Hart had to grow into the role, but Tyler Ennis inherited from day one. And I don't know if that was even by design because, he just kind of fell into it and they thrust it on him. Some guys can handle it, some can't. He could, man. He was a great, great point guard for this team. And it's unfortunate that they stumbled down the stretch, and so we probably don't remember him as well as we would have if they had kept that run going. But, they were number 1 in the country, and he was a starting point guard for the number 1 team in the country. So I'm ecstatic to have him as my backup point guard.
Second most assists for a freshman, behind only Pearl Washington. Also led the team in steals. It's a shame that he went. He left. He didn't even get drafted, and. I'm sorry, no, he did get drafted. He was the 18th overall pick by the Suns, but didn't really have much of a career. I don't think Syracuse was really ready for him to go. That kind of shook up their plans a little bit, but it happened. All right, Mr. Irrelevant.
All right, last pick of the draft, and this is kind of frustrating because there's so many great players, and I'm having trouble right now deciding what to do because there's guys like Dave Johnson and Brandon Trish still available who both deserve to be
battle. Ryan Blackwell.
Yeah, Tyus Battle. Yeah. Ryan Blackwell. Roosevelt, or no, I have Bowie. Todd Bergen's still out there.
Damone Brown.
Damone Brown, yeah. Chris Joseph. I mean, we could have gone deep, but when I look at the makeup of my team right now, I'm big throughout the lineup, but I am missing another frontline player, and so I'm going with a guy that's I think deserves to be on this list, even though it's someone I don't ever remember seeing play. But to round out the draft, I'm going with Rudy Hackett. And there it is.
Rudy Hackett. 6'9" out of Mount Vernon, New York. Almost 1,500 points, 6th all-time in rebounding. And his senior year, He averaged 22 and 13, and that was Syracuse's first ever Final Four. Yeah, this guy, he probably should have gone before this. Made a buzzer beater to send the Elite Eight game against Kansas State to overtime, and eventually Syracuse won, got to its first ever Final Four.
Also, 6th leading rebounder in school history in just 3 years. Again, this was back when freshman ball was still a thing. I'm pretty sure that's why he only played 3 years.
And the team made the tournament all 3 years. He was drafted by both the New Orleans Jazz, and I had to work this note in here, of the NBA, the ABA Spirit of St. Louis, where he wound up playing 1 year, the same year where Bob Costas was the play-by-play voice of the Spirit of St. Louis.
Oh, there's a fun fact. Good last pick with a fun fact like that.
There you go.
So let's look at it. There it is, the complete draft. And I am surprised at some of the names that aren't on there, but I'm not surprised with any of the names that are on there. I mentioned earlier that there's some certain players that I really dislike in Syracuse basketball history, and I see Dante Green on there, and he's really the only one. The other guys I was worried might get taken were guys like Terrence Roberts, who I despise. Nothing personal, Terrence. Deshaun Williams, who probably wouldn't make the team, but overall we did a pretty good job. And
Highest Battle doesn't get picked.
Yeah, that's kind of a insult, I think.
Dave Johnson not getting picked either.
Yeah.
I think, if you're looking at the best players not taken, those two, Todd Bergen I mentioned before, he had over 1,500 points.
The number 11th player in school history scoring did not get picked, and that would be Eric Sanifer.
We just saw this. Here's another one we didn't pick. We just saw his wife in the Jordan documentary because he married Michael Jordan's daughter, Rakeem Christmas.
Yeah, Rack we think might make this team. If it was a 10-person draft, all these people get picked.
Yeah. Yeah.
You do this draft 10 years ago, a guy that would have been drafted as Wendell Alexis.
Oh, yeah.
Recent talent. He was a great player back in the 80s for Syracuse.
Otis Hill was another one.
Conrad McRae.
Conrad McRae.
He was on my list.
I would have loved to have had the opportunity to pick Billy Edelin.
Andy Routens.
National championship.
I loved Andy Routens.
Yeah, Andy Routens.
Second all-time leading three-point shooter. Just trying to see here. Looking through
There's no discussion of Avenger White III. One of the best three-point shooting seasons this program's ever seen.
Yeah.
Did anybody mention Darryl Watkins?
Nope.
Yeah, he was why he makes my list too. Although I didn't despise him as much as Roberts because he improved his free throw shooting every year.
He kind of hated that team.
Whole group so underachieved.
Yeah. And then an older guy, Bill Smith from Rush Henrietta.
I should have took him to go with the Section 5 theme. And then a lot of old guys. Dennis Duval didn't get picked. That's kind of crazy. Jim Boeheim himself didn't get picked.
And then Bill Smith, I was just going to mention, he has the all-time individual game scoring record. He scored 47 points in one game. That's a Syracuse record. In Lafayette.
So, guys, I think the only fair way to go about this is I think we should each pick which team we think is the best without being able to choose our own team.
Okay.
I'll put that up here, and we'll see if anybody's team stands out, and we can go straight through draft order. Let Dave make the first pick.
Let's see. Looking down through here. I am going to Tane. I hate to say it, because I feel like you and I are in a lot of drafts together, and we battle it out a lot. But I really like Tane's team a lot. You got the national championship, freshman of the year, all that. Carmelo, obviously, Dave Bing. I really like that team. Even some recent players like Jeremy Grant and stuff like that. I'll give my vote to Tane.
I think Ekis has the best team. He's got Pearl Washington. I probably wouldn't have taken him number one, but he's the Pearl. He's got the all-time leading scorer. He's got a monster shot blocker. He's got C.J. Fair, just a great all-around player, is one of my favorites. And he's got a bunch of snipers. And Benajay, who's versatile. I love Ekis' team.
All right.
Tane.
I'm gonna go with Brendan's team. I think I love Coleman. I love McNamara. I love Jason Hart. I think he might have stretched a little bit for Dion Waiters. I think he would have been there probably a lot later. But I like the core of that team. And when I think about Syracuse basketball, I think about Derrick Coleman and I think about Gerry Mcnamara.
Yeah, 1-2. That's pretty awesome. And I love Hart as a point guard. But yeah, I panicked on Waiters. I know Shays is a guy probably people were surprised with, but I think he was good. But yeah.
All right. Interested to hear Brad's thoughts?
Yeah, tough. I like Tane's team. The guard play with Red Autry and Scoop, I think it's great. I think Red's a great point guard for that team. And you've got, to me, number 1 and 2 on my list were Bing and Carmelo Anthony. And I thought they would go 1-2. And the fact that they're both on the same roster, for me, maybe the best center in the history of the program, and a shooter with Shumpert and, guys that are slashers and great forwards and Orr and Jeremy Grant. That's a great team, I think.
1 through 5, Tony. Your starting 5 is really, really good. I don't love 6, 7, and 8 for you, but again, those are your guys off the bench. But you're starting. If I had to say starting 5, Tony's probably at the best. So Ekis is good too. I don't know.
All right. Well, Brad, nobody picked your team or my team. That's kind of sad. That makes me sad. But I'm proud of my team, and I see what you were doing with your team. And, with the 4th and 5th picks, we weren't able to get the true firepower, although I thought I stole John Wallace 5th. But
I love Wallace and Owens. That's fun.
I love my team. I think they would compete really well against any of your teams, but I can't pick my team, and I don't think I would anyways, because I look at some of these teams. I look at Ekis' team here, Washington, Moton. I mean, that is like a great start. And C.J. Fair was a guy I wanted on my team. I think
that hurt. Yep.
Benajay was a smart pick. But the fact that Dante Green's on the roster, even though he may be prolific and help this team, I can't pick a team with Dante Green. And then I look at Brendan's team, and Derrick Coleman's the best player in Syracuse basketball history. I don't care what anybody says. A lot of it has to do with the era, where the Big East was and just how amazing he was. I mean, you got to remember when he came out of high school, people were saying he was going to be the next Magic Johnson. And then Gerry Mcnamara, my God, how can you beat a team with McNamara and Coleman on it? I like the pick with Hart, and then you lost me for a little bit mid-round with Waiter, Shays, and Richardson. Nothing wrong with those guys per se, but I thought maybe you could have bolstered the team a little more. But then you finished strong with Onuaku, who maybe I should have taken maybe even in the 3rd round instead of my center, Roosevelt Bowie. Tane, Anthony, Bing. I mean, unbelievable. And I think that Autry was an underrated pick in this draft as a point guard. And Jeremy Grant was a guy I wanted too, because if you can bring a guy like Jeremy Grant off your bench, forget about it. And Brad's team with Sherman, I love the idea of going with the Douglas Warwick connection to start out. Leo Routens is probably the most fundamentally sound basketball player on this board. And I got to give the nod. I think despite that mid-round, those mid-round hiccups, I think that Brendan's got the best team with Coleman and McNamara heading it up. After that, I think we could fill in a lot of guys. So I'll go with Brendan.
My analysis is on my own team is just, like, I panicked on the Waiters pick. I didn't know where I wanted to go there. Like, if I get C.J. Fair, if Ekis doesn't take Fair there, I'm just like, I'm dropping the mic with Fair on my team with those first 3 guys. But I think you're right. But I did like the way I finished. But I really do like all the teams. I thought expectations were high for this going in. I thought it could be a lot of fun, and I really think that we met them and maybe even surpassed them. This was not that we did great. It was just in terms of the level of fun. I don't know about you guys. I thought that was really fun.
Yeah, I always love going back in Syracuse history.
That's the thing, Jim and I, when we would do our podcast, it's just to talk about the history. It's almost as fun talking about the history as it is talking about the current teams.
Yeah.
Yep.
I know we talked about the backdrops before, and Tani, you get the really nice looking backdrop that's synthetic. But Brad, I love the Otto the Orange throw pillow.
That thing is so old, and I will never.
I want to get a shout out. We already gave a shout out to Ekis's hat. Of course, Jim, you're in the studio, and the studio looks great. But anyway, I had my national championship banner, and then I don't know if you guys have seen this before. This Mike Waters book, talking about Syracuse history. And Mike Waters is a great guy, longtime beat writer for Syracuse. Used to come on my talk show a lot. But this is fun. It's got all sorts of inserts and stuff, and like old programs. And because of the draft, I pulled this back out, and it was a lot of fun looking at it.
That's a great book.
Plug for Mike Waters' book. All right. Well, Jim, I'll let you kind of wrap things up. Thanks to everybody. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was awesome, guys. Thanks. And again, I'll put the draft board up for one last look. And to get to talk about these guys and bring back the memories. And Brad, I think that our age was showing just a little bit there in just some of the guys that were probably just out of these guys' memories, like Leo Routins and Raphael Addison, maybe to some extent.
I probably went too heavy on the 80s if I was looking for validation from this from the youngsters here.
And then Roosevelt Bowie, I saw him play a couple times. Once maybe. I saw him play. I think I listened to him on the radio when they. It's just the times have changed so much. And before we get out of here, I don't want to hold everybody up, but this kind of stuff makes me a little sad, only because we're never going to have those days back of those Big East battles when Syracuse and all the Big East teams were almost like underdogs going against some of these blue buds and building a conference from scratch. And, the day that Syracuse accepted that invitation to the ACC, what I really loved the most about Syracuse basketball took a little of a hit. And I don't think I'll ever feel the way I do about that I did watching Syracuse prior to that, especially, childhood memories of the 80s. And then not a big fan of the ACC move, even though it was probably the right move for the program. But, Brad, as you know, on the Upstate Hoops podcast, we have gone back and forth about that. The heart of our podcast were the years where conference realignment was like just getting underway. And we hypothesized about all these scenarios. And now that we're in the ACC, it still just bothers me come conference tournament time when we're not in Madison Square Garden and seeing the ACC logo on the Carrier Dome court.
There was such pride in being part of the Big East and being one of the standard bearers for that league, and having started it from nothing, and that's gone. And the fact that the Big East has survived and moved on is sad to me, because we all know what that league was and what it should be, and it's not that. And the ACC it's a house, not a home, if you want to metaphorically think of it that way. And that's not what this program deserves, honestly. But that's what we're left with.
Yeah, it went from being the beasts of the East to the northern team in the ACC. Picking up the scraps from Carolina and Duke and company. But
man, I missed the Big East tournament. Man, do I miss the Big East tournament.
Yep, that's the one. I'm not excited about Greensboro, or even when they went to Brooklyn. Sorry, it's not the same.
They were in Charlotte last year, and I live in Charlotte, just outside, so I was able to go to last year's ACC tournament. It didn't have that same aura around it. It didn't have the same feel. It was just it looked like something that was completely unfamiliar to me, and I longed for the days of the Big East.
I'm glad I got a chance to go a couple times. I went in 2003. They lost in the semis to UConn that year, but then they went on and did something pretty special after that. And then I saw them in 2005, the whole tournament, and they won. That was Hakeem Warwick was MVP that year. That was the year before Gerry went crazy, the first of the back-to-back.
Amazing just to be in the city during the tournament.
And the Blarney, was it the Blarney Rock? Is that what the place was called? Which is since closed. The Syracuse bar down the street, where all the fans would gather before the game. It was awesome.
Well, with that being said, guys, great job on the draft. It was fun. Maybe we'll do it a few years down the road, or maybe a couple years we'll do a reiteration where maybe we bring in some more guys and we can go deeper. Because, again, I did not get a chance to take Sonny Spera.
Steve Johnson, highest battle.
So many guys.
Apologize to all those guys.
Derek Brower.
Apologies.
But that'll do it for our all-time Syracuse basketball legends draft here on the Upstate Hoops podcast. I don't know when this podcast will be back, but again, it will be back at some point. And so for my co-host Brad Connor and for Brendan Harrington, Dave Ekis, and Tane Robinson, I'm Jim Sinicropi. Thanks for watching, and let's go Orange.